Today on the Crit House, we welcome Christine Wilson. Born in New Zealand and now based in Melbourne, Australia, Christine is not only an accomplished photographer but also a registered surgical nurse. Her work in the operating room is intense, and photography is her form of meditation, a way to unwind and find peace. Her striking black and white imagery captures the beauty of Australia. Today, Christine Wilson shares her myFIVE images featuring the works of Ansel Adams, Shirley Baker, Jane Usher, Richard Ponder, and Sebastio Salgado. Christine, you have you are a photographer, but not by profession. You're a registered nurse professionally,
That's
right?
right. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Surgical nurse. Yeah.
And where are you in Australia?
Melbourne. Victoria, I suppose, is I travel around Victoria.
Well, tell us about who you are as a photographer and how you work. I mean, I know, again, you're like me, where you have an actual job, and then you are very focused on photography when you're not at that job. But what kind of imagery do you take, and why do you take it?
Well, I suppose when I'm not in my day job, it's a very intense type of job, and I feel like being a photographer is great on my days off. I feel like it's a meditation. I think I've said that somewhere else before. It's poles apart from what I do in the other job. It's good for my mental health. Get out into nature and step into the big landscapes.
The way you talk about that is very similar to how I talk about it. It's that, there's that we don't shoot the same thing, but there's that Zen kind of, you get into a headset.
You get into the zone.
Into that zone. That's right. You get into the zone and so, but we all have different places and different ways that we find that. And I'm 100% the same way. I mean, my job is not life or death like yours is as a registered nurse, but there's still that pressure that you need to sort of find a way of having the release.
Yeah.
Well, so you've come on here and I've given you this challenge of choosing on like 5 images of all, or five works of art from the history of art. And what did you go through? What was your process, and how did you decide on what those 5 works were going to be?
Well, like everybody else, it was so hard, so hard. And I had so many, and I was thinking, I think I need to talk about this. No, I'm going to talk about that. And I think really in the end, I thought to myself, well, how did I start with all of this? And I started probably because of my father, who was a painter. And that's why I chose Richard Ponder, Quiet Places, the book.
Well,
and
let's start with Richard. Let's take a look.
He was originally Australian. He moved from Australia to New Zealand, and he was quite a prolific painter, I think, in the 70s. And most of the paintings in the book are around the 70s or so. It's also got a lot of paintings from Wellington in New Zealand, which is where I was born and I grew up there. There's some paintings, most of them are landscapes. There is a couple of Australian ones in there as well. When I look in the book, it's kind of almost like a prehistoric nature. They've got a prehistoric kind of feel to them. They give me the sense of when I'm out in the landscape taking photos, just this isolation and awe really of nature and how amazing it is, And I think he's really captured that. I feel like I could step into it.
Yeah.
It gives me the feeling like I want to step into it.
Do these images, like, are these things that you saw when you were in New Zealand? I don't like, are they places that are familiar to you? Is that why there's that difference?
Yeah. Some of them are. Some of them are. So some of the paintings are from Wellington, and when I look at the paintings from Wellington, they're recognisable landscapes to me. I mean, it's where I grew up. There's a painting in there which I really like. It's a cove, you could call it a cove or a bay, where there's yachts anchored, and there's trees and what have you around, which is quite a common landscape to stumble on in New Zealand. There's lots of coves and bays and what have you. when I look at these paintings, yeah, they do remind me of home, because there's a couple in there of Lake Taupo, which I've been to, people fishing in Lake Taupo, but the paintings have got such atmosphere. They've got more atmosphere than actually being there, if you sort of understand what I'm saying. He's really created something quite special in the painting.
So onto the landscapes from Ansel Adams now, back
Yeah.
to this country in America, in Yosemite.
This particular shot, Clearing Winter Storm, was the first black and white landscape photo I ever really looked at and went, wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. It's just epic. That's what drew me in, although I didn't start taking landscape photos for some years. I saw that photo and I was living in a share house, and I don't know why there was this. I mean, there was a sudden attraction, and gosh, this is what I have to do this. When I started, some years later, after I'd seen these sorts of photos, when I was still doing film photography, a friend of mine in the share house that I was in taught me how to work in the darkroom. So I did some darkroom stuff very, very early on. And I remember thinking, when I was learning it from my friend, Leonie was her name, I thought to myself, I'll go down and I'll, smash out 10 photos or something like that. And you just can't do that.
Yeah.
I spent a couple of weeks on one photo, it was ridiculous, really. But you do get to sit, when you are printing photos in the darkroom, you get to sit with the photos for a long, long period of time. And I guess that's what's good about processing in Lightroom and Photoshop. When you're processing an image, or at least when I'm processing it, I stay with the image for a couple of days, and then I'll leave it. And then I'll come back maybe the following week and go, not sure about that. Come back a week later. I take forever, absolute ever, to process my stuff.
I always felt like, having spent time in the darkroom, and I was never that great in the darkroom either, but having been there, there's that like base knowledge, there's that fundamental understanding of how an image can come together. It's just that time in the darkroom gives you some understanding about how to develop and how to process an image that I think helps in Lightroom and Photoshop and whatever tools we're using these days.
100%.
I just feel like I understand it better than somebody who only goes in through what tools we have right now and has never been in the darkroom. And I think that's a really old man view of the world, but I'm an old man, so. Sebastião Salgado with this image, which I believe is Alaska. Is that right?
It's amazing, isn't it? And it's just, again, these black and white images of big landscapes just emphasize the grandness of it all, and the quietness of it all. You take the color away from it, and you can just see the texture, the mountains, the river going through the middle, the light, the clouds in the back. I mean, it's just phenomenal, and it just makes you want to go there. I think with his photos, I was reading recently, his are all digital, and he converts them into a negative and then prints them from the negative. But all of his work, from what I've read anyway so far, he uses digital, which I think would surprise a lot of people. I think people would think that all his stuff is film, but it's not. I mean, in the early days it was, obviously, but not now.
Well, so is it just the grandeur of the landscape that has meaning to you in this image, or sort of like what is it?
Mountains. I love mountains. So I've got a thing about mountains. Mountains and tumultuous weather. I mean, the weather there looks quite. It looks like there could be some bad weather in the back there.
Yeah, I mean that rain cloud coming down the valley is. You're kind of wondering where it's going to go. Maybe going the other direction. But one of the interesting things for me in seeing like this image, and I don't know when this was taken, but there's not human element that I'm seeing as I kind of go through this, and that's pretty amazing in this day and age. You know, I'm living in one of the most populated areas of the United States in the Northeast near Boston, and you can't, you know, it's almost impossible to capture an image where there's no
People.
element of humanity,
Mm.
even when you're close up. And this one, it's great. It's great to see that there are some spaces that exist that don't have us marking the
Stomping all
landscape.
over it.
Yes.
Yeah,
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 that's
yeah.
right.
I mean, I think it's a national park. It's a protected sanctuary area. This one.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why there's not much human presence. I mean, so obviously there would be human presence in there.
Now,
Mm,
Jill Usher is an artist that I was not familiar with,
mm,
and this is not grand landscapes.
no.
So tell us why this what the meaning for this is for this work.
My dad was always one of these people that would take photos of when he was on the road. He would take photos of old buildings, old boats that had beached, and I've got a bit of a thing about the explorers. You know, it interested me that the Scott and Shackleton that went to the Antarctic, and Scott perished there. Obviously, he died, but Shackleton survived, and how the conditions that they lived in. You know, people that go on expeditions now have all sorts of high tech gear and navigation devices, and you know, uh, they pro- it's much harder for them to die when they do these
Yeah.
sorts of things. But back then, the equipment and the equipment and the clothing and everything that they used was very crude and very very basic and was barely sufficient, really.
What are we looking at in the images? Is this the equipment that they used?
Well, yeah, this is the huts with the remnants, tins of food, which is still there. Everything everything that was left there when they walked out. But she wanted to photograph everything as it was. You know, there was skeletons of birds and what have you that they'd eaten, and I think maybe even some skeletons of dogs, the sled dogs that they used.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was just like they walked out and didn't come back and stood still in time.
This is a document of
Really,
what was left over from that expedition.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The whole book. It's a whole big book on it with lots of photos.
And your final image, we go to the street with Shirley Baker.
Oh yeah,
This is
this
beautiful.
it is beautiful, isn't it? And it's very ethereal. There's not a lot in this image. It's just the two, and you
Yep.
can see the girl swinging, and you can see the light in her hair. I just feel like again, it's a moment in time, frozen. And Shirley Baker did a lot of photos, and I guess it's quite nostalgic for me because that's the era that I grew up in. I didn't grow up there, but I grew up in the 60s and
Yeah.
70s, and all of her photos are around the 60s, 70s, and I think she took some in the 80s as well. And that was my growing up period. So I really relate to her photography. Yeah, I just love that photo. It's just I don't know, it's very simple, really. You know, there's not a lot in it. There's no cars. There's no other kids around. It's just those two.
It's a beautiful, sweet little, yeah, moment in
Mm,
time. And you know, being a street guy, I love the simplicity and the moment, and the light is just, you know, you mentioned the light in her hair, both of their
mm.
hairs, the halo that's around both of them.
Yeah, you can
It's
see
just
them. Yeah,
perfect. It's
yeah, it
just
is,
a
isn't it?
well, Christine
And I
Wilson,
think
it's been great talking to you and learning about you as a photographer, as well as
thank you.
a YouTuber, as a registered nurse.
Mm,
Thank you for joining us, and I appreciate the what was eye-opening in a number of different images that you've shown us. So thank you for that.
good. I'm glad. Thanks very much for having me on, Jeff.
Yeah,
It was a
and
pleasure.
thank you all for watching the Crit House.